My name is Renata von Tscharner. I'm the founder and president of the Charles River Conservancy. And I'd like to talk today about this organization, which is now 17 years old, and give you an idea of what this organization is all about. It's about making the parklands more active, attractive, and accessible for all. So what does that mean along the Charles River? The Charles River, that starts in Hopkinton on the left, is 80 miles long, but the Charles River Conservancy, we work on the last 10 miles of that wonderful river. It goes from the harbor on the right to the Watertown Dam on the left. The river and all the parklands, the 450 acres of parklands on both sides, are owned by you, by the state of Massachusetts, and managed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. A lot of people work and live within walking distance. So how can we go about and making that river more active, attractive, and accessible for all? So we run a volunteer program. We call what we do Stewardship, and we have 2,000 volunteers each year. We have a full-time coordinator, and this shows where we have events on both sides of the river. And a lot of the events are in Herder Park, Magazine Beach, but all along the river we do our work, and that involves planting about 10,000 daffodils each year. It involves pruning trees, removing invasives, and doing general landscaping work. And recently we have also been working a lot in Herder Park, a wonderful park that has been closed. The public theater has been closed for several years, and it's going to open on the 15th of July. The public theater is reopening thanks to the Friends of Herder Park and a lot of Conservancy volunteers. So in addition to the stewardship and those volunteers, we have by now had 28,000 volunteers working with us, over $1 million of contributed labor. We also do capital projects. And a current capital project is called our swim park. But you would say it's illegal. It's illegal to swim in the park. It has been illegal since 1950. Not that it was clean before, but people didn't know about that. But so we started by having city splashes. Since 1913, we got permits to swim in the Charles for 1 day a week, and over 1,300 people have jumped in, and we heard clearly from them that they want to see a permanent swim park, and we did a feasibility study and determined that North Point Park, just downriver from the Museum of Science, is the best place to do that. And so we are now testing the water, we're looking at the depth, we're looking at all the conditions necessary to build such a park. And you might have heard that we built another park nearby, the skate park. The skate park is a project that was started at the beginning of the Conservancy, and it is to bring young people to a part of the park that was inaccessible, it was contaminated, it was a park underneath the ramp of the Zaken Bridge, and it's this area here, and you will see of how it looks now. And that was in 2000 when North Point Park had not received yet the 100 million of mitigation funds, and that's how the park looks today. 6.5 million later, over $1 million of legal fees donated by Wilmer Hale and used by hundreds and hundreds every day. At opening day we had 2,000 kids. So that was a large improvement project that the Conservancy undertook, and it's now owned and maintained by the DCR. So, stewardship, capital projects, but very important also is advocacy. Advocacy for the parklands, to make sure people can get to them, make sure people can bicycle, run, walk safely along them. So advocacy on behalf of the parklands and of the parkland users is very important for us. So we took on the Anderson Memorial Bridge. Right now, as you go on the Boston side, you have to go up to the bridge, you have to struggle with the traffic, and you go down. So we took on this advocacy, and we are now at 25%. Mass DOT has agreed to take on that project. They already moved all the pipes, and now we also got the green light from the Mass Historical Commission. So we are moving forward with that effort. Much larger advocacy effort is the turnpike and the reconstruction of the viaduct, the realignment, and this is a project that is right in the heart. It's between the Harvard Business School and Brookline. It's where this triangle is, and that's where we want to add parklands and make it easier for people to access the river. This is a rendering done by architects. It shows the Charles River in the foreground, Magazine Beach at the bottom left, and it shows of how this development of 100 acres could look like. It's all owned by Harvard University. The area, you see the turnpike turning there, and in the curb is a new West Station. And on the left-hand side is BU campus at Brookline, which right now they cannot get to the river, and there's no real green space along the river. So we're advocating for river access, and we are also working on having a real green space on the river. What else does the Conservancy do in addition to the stewardship, to capital projects, and to advocacy? We also do publications. We published at the very early the Conservancy, we published with the MIT Press a book, Inventing the Charles River. It was the PhD thesis of Carl Haglund, who still works with the DCR, the most knowledgeable man about the Charles River. And so we published that. And of course, I do regular TV shows. There are now probably about 120 on YouTube out there. And every few years we publish something called River Stories. And I would like to read a little bit from the story. You see the authors in that publication are Tom Ashbrook, Stephen Greenblatt, Megan Marshall, David Ferry, David Gessner, Mike Dukakis, William Rawn, Nancy C. Scholes, Florence Ladd, Liza Ketchum, Peter Howe, and Ferdy Hellweger. And I'd like to read a little bit at the beginning of David Gessner's story. He calls it a Charles River Journal. When most people think of the Charles River, if they think of it at all, they imagine a tame and a preppy river, a river that go into the Ivy League, a river of boathouses and scholars. But when Captain John Smith spied the Charles River from Boston Harbor in 1611, he wasn't thinking about scholars or tea parties or final clubs. Like any explorer worth his salt, his dreams were of discovery, and in the river he thought he'd hit upon something big. He took one look at its great gaping mouth and assumed that it was a mighty corridor of water that cut deep into the continent. It turned out he was spectacularly wrong in his assumption. Not only doesn't the river reach halfway to California, it barely makes it halfway to Worcester. What Smith had not anticipated was that the Charles, like many people, has a mouth too big for its body. His disappointment over the river's length did not stop him from naming it after his prince, forever saddling the poor river with a name that is stiff, a little goofy, and effeatly English. Imagine the difference if he had called it the Chuck. And so River Stories is a publication that allows people who love to read, who love images, love watercolors, to discover a different aspect of the Charles River. So I now would like to read another story by Ferdy Hellweger. He's a professor at Northeastern and he loves the water, he loves water testing, and he is now working with a master's student to help him test the water every day during the swim season at North Point Park to make sure we can place our swim park there. And the story by Ferdy Hellweger is called My Computerized Charles River. I came to Boston from Hamburg, Germany. Boston's Charles is quite similar and often compared to Hamburg's Ulster ever since Charles Eliot inspected the Ulster in 1886 as part of the research that led to the creation of Boston's landmark Metropolitan District Commission. Like the Charles, the Ulster is in the heart of a major city, dammed at the downstream end to form a basin and used extensively for recreation. Both rivers have similar challenges arising from centuries of heedless pollution and industrial abuse. We won't currently, but many would like to swim in these urban rivers. So, although I enjoyed sailing on and running around it, the Charles didn't immediately capture my attention. It was only after graduating from college and leaving Boston that I learned to appreciate it more. Those who have lived in New York will understand. When I came back to join the faculty of Northeastern, people were talking about making the Charles swimmable again, and I got inspired by this vision. I started researching its water quality by collecting samples and analyzing them in the lab. My students and I spent much time on this beautiful river, and we enjoy, except when doing a high-volume sample run during the heat wave or manually collecting hourly samples over a 48-hour period. Later we learned to use a sampling robot for this. The hourly data from the robot helped us characterize how the bacterial levels change in response to drivers like rainfall or operation of the dam. We helped characterize and understand water quality at potential swimming locations, and in 2013 we helped organize the first public swim over 50 years. I was very happy to participate in this and found it wonderfully refreshing. To all these people on the Esplanade realize that there's a cool and inviting and swimmable river just a few feet from what they sweat in the sun. The plan is to do more of this, and I think this would significantly improve the quality of life in Boston. Much of my work now focuses on developing a computer model of the river, like a global climate model and running simulations. I have my own little Charles River video game on my computer and can play with it. I can change how we operate the dam and see what that does to the bacteria. I can cut the phosphorus loading in half and predict how it changes the algae. In effect, I can play God, redesigning the river as we might want it to be or making it act up in ways we might like to control. The model is fun, but also quite useful for understanding how the river works. However, in contrast to the real river, the computerized river is quite well behaved. There are no unexpected toxic algae blooms, such as the ones that periodically crop up and have occasionally disrupted the Conservancy pilot Charles River Community swims. In its whimsical behaviors, the Charles is not unique or even unusual. We still have a lot of work to do before we understand and can predict how our rivers respond to what we do to them. I have grown quite fond of my computerized Charles River, over which I can exercise such control and which tells me such interesting secrets as the river's behavior. But still, I can't dive into it for a refreshing swim on a hot day. For that, we will have to carry on the work of analyzing the river, building safe facilities for swimming, and persuading public officials that a swimmable Charles or Ulster is not a scientific fantasy, but a real opportunity waiting to happen. Well, that was written in 2099, so we have come a long way. We have now our 5th community swim, and we are actively planning a swim park. So, but Ferdy Hellweger's work and that of his graduate students, and he brings in also PhD students and high school students. He has a whole team working on that, and that is really a great gift, and we got a private donation to fund that work. And that's how we operate. We get money from individuals like yourself who live near the river or love the river. We get money from foundations. We get money from corporations who come and work with us. For the skate park, we got some public money from the city of Cambridge, at the time the Boston Redevelopment Authority in Boston, and the state of Massachusetts. We are a small and lean and high energy non-profit, so I hope you'll support our effort. And we also do some other fun things. Out of this book, River Stories, we were offered the opportunity by Google to invite some of the authors of River Story. You see from left to right, you see Megan Marshall and Ferdy Hellweger and Florence Ladd and Nancy C. Schultz, Peter Howe and Liza Ketchum, and on the right as the moderator was Tom Ashbrook, who himself also wrote a very moving story. And the interactions with those authors was just amazing. We then also invited some others to talk about the future of the Charles, and this program, as well as all the TV shows that I've been doing on CCTV and also BNN, are available on YouTube, so you can look them up on the Charles River Conservancy, and you find tapes about swimming in the Charles, or you find Fred Salvucci talking about the future of transportation along the Charles. You can find runners like John Paz talking about running, David Montague about his wonderful program of park and pedal, that you can leave your car in Herder Park and then take your bike out and pedal into the city. So that it's a wonderful array of programs that you can find. Another thing we started, it's now over 13 years ago with Revels, is River Sing. River Sing is a celebration of the autumnal equinox, which happens toward the end of September, and people gather at the Weeks Bridge, and then Revels engages the thousands of people in singing and dancing, merrymaking, and then when it gets dark, it gets very mysterious, and the boat comes down the river because it's the equinox, it's the sun and the moon, and it turns. It's almost like a ballet. And Steve Strickland with his saxophone plays, and then the people on the banks in call and response sing a specially composed river hymn by George Emlyn. If you've not experienced River Sing, I hope you do it. It is a truly magical participatory celebration of the river, completely non-commercial, just the joy of singing, the joy of community, the joy of the river and the seasons. So when you go to this publication, River Stories, you also would find this, it's a poster, it's also inserted in the back of the story, a wonderful illustration of all the urban bridges across the Charles by Frank Costantino, a very talented watercoloring artist. He created those images of those beautiful bridges. We are so fortunate to have those amazing bridges that range from the Zaken Bridge, which is this ultra-modern bridge designed by Christian men, to the traditional, what some people call the salt and pepper Longfellow Bridge, or the one at the top, the Weeks Bridge, which was built to carry the steam over to the Harvard Business School. So we have a wonderful range, and the newest ones are on the right, two pedestrian bridges. At the bottom, one by Miguel Rosales. It's right next to the Longfellow Bridge. I think it will be called the Fanny Appleton Bridge, but it's still under construction. Or just above it, a beautiful new pedestrian bridge that is right next to the skate park. It goes over the area where the duck tours go into the river. It's called the North Bank Bridge. There soon will be its fellow bridge called the South Bank Bridge, and that is being built with mitigation funds from the Big Dig. The North Bank Bridge is a gift of the federal government. It was part of the Recovery Act after 2008. Absolutely beautiful bridge for biking. So I hope you will take out your running sneakers or your bike and enjoy those parklands. We are so fortunate that on both sides of the river, from the harbor up to the Watertown Dam, all these parklands are owned by the state, by you, and so we need to make sure that the DCR, the state agency that owns them and is responsible for them, gets enough funding to take care of them. And I hope you also will support private non-profits like the Charles River Conservancy or the Esplanade Association or the Friends of Herder Park and the Friends of Magazine Beach, who all work to make those parklands more beautiful, more accessible, more attractive. So we're coming to the end of the show. I just want to show you a few more of those watercolors from the book. Kind of shows of how some artists see the river with the swim cap, because there's now also a swim race in the Charles, or the skate park on the top right, all the work that volunteers do with tree pruning. We also had Sunday games in the parklands, and biking. Biking is such an important part of the river, because there are very few places where, even if you are not an experienced bicyclist, that you can bike some 20 miles, 10 on either side of the river, on the water's edge, and very few road crossings, and you are not on the road, you are on your own pathway that you share with pedestrians and some runners. So I hope you will go out and enjoy your river, and you will maybe also volunteer with us, either in landscaping or in some other way. We also get professional volunteers who help us with projects, advise us on engineering. So we need help on many fronts, because we are a small organization and we all love the river, and I hope that you will support us, and you will find some information about the river on this website, and you feel free to contact us, and we will be glad to guide you to resources, to arrange a volunteer event for you, and make sure you help us get that swimming going. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you on the river.